Well, hello again, people. Time for another Eagle test shot build update. Things have been progressing. Chronologically, this is about 2 weeks after the previous video. I know I uploaded that video last week, but I had actually shot it the weekend before. So, a little further into my project, a few more of the sub-assemblies. Of course, given that I work full-time and stuff, means that I can't devote a lot of time to these model projects, but I do try to find time to get about an hour or two in each day. And let me show you the progress that I'm at so far. Right here you see one of the passageway sections for the Eagle. These go on either side of the passenger pod. This side here with the opening, because I haven't installed the corridor, the doorway yet, goes to where the passenger pod is. Then you've got the areas where the leg pods go, and on the back side, depending on if this is the front passageway or the aft passageway, you would either have the engines go here, or if it was the front section, you would have the structure that the command module docks to. Sitting right next to it, you see the thrust structure for the engine, for the engine section, and right behind it is the big trademark of the entire Eagle, one of the most distinctive features next to the nose, the actual spine. So, give me a moment, and I will show you what exactly I've done to date. Well, as you can see, this is the thrust structure that the engines of the Eagle Transporter bolt onto. This section right here, this octagonal truss structure, actually bolts onto the back of one of the passageway sections. Then you've got these long carry-through sections, and then one feature that you don't see once the engine bells and the fuel tanks are installed are these 4 diagonal carry-through truss pieces. This gives the structure an incredible amount of rigid support. I mean, that's one of the appeals of the Eagle design, is the fact that even though it's a fictional spacecraft, there's just so many elements to it that look like they could be found on that it could be an actual spacecraft. But there are a lot of parts involved in this assembly. First off, you've got this section right here, which is one piece. All these little holes are present because this is where the everything pretty much bolts onto. This piece right here, this structure as it stands is made up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, 6, 7 pieces. Just like that. They're all glued to this assembly. Once everything's aligned properly and you put all the engines on, then you basically drop the base plate on and you've got a fully assembled engine section. Well, I'll have to take a look at the instructions to... Yes, I do have a set of preliminary instructions to make sure that everything indeed goes the way I said it goes. But in addition to that, you've also got the fuel tanks, and then you got those spherical tanks that bolt on here as well. But it's incredible how things fit. I would say the only drawback with building an Eagle, given that you have a lot of these separate pieces of rod and tube structure, is that it means that if you're going to try to build this model to win contests, you have to take care of the seams. Thankfully, the seams have not really been that bad. I mean, just a few swipes with scraping it off with an X-Acto knife, and then a few swipes with a file followed by sandpaper does the job pretty nicely. But one of the things I will point out when you're building this structure is it's a very good idea to do test fits to make sure everything fits properly. And secondly, of course, I've said it before in my other videos, a good plastic weld glue is almost a necessity for building a structure like this. I mean, because CA glue, you get something in position, you can't really move anything. This one, gluing the parts on, massaging it, and getting everything put together, liquid glue allows you to massage and position everything properly. And how I essentially did this was I glued these parts, of course, to the structure that holds on the engine bells, and then from there I would snap it onto the plate to make sure it all fit properly. And by doing it this way, I pretty much ensured that the fit was exact. I mean, I started with the square pieces on either side, glued those on, and then I just added each of the diagonal pieces one piece at a time. And you take your time and you do it properly, you end up with a pretty good looking structure. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how that fits. Moving on to the passageway section. This particular passageway section right here is going to end up being the one that the engine pods bolt onto. The other one's going to be for the command module. Of course, technically I can swap these around whenever I want to. It's kind of interesting looking close at the details here. It's funny what the eye picks up. I mean, these little structures right here on top, these are Airfix lunar module has from the 1/144 scale Airfix Saturn V and Saturn 1B kits. These I think are from a Gemini. I'm not sure what this octagonal piece is, but as you can see, the tolerances are very tight and everything fits together really, really nice. Now, looking at images of the 44-inch studio models, it does look like over time that some more details were added to these passageways every time the 44-inch models were rebuilt after a crash or two. But once, I'll leave it up to you guys if you want to add those details to your production kits, but overall, from what I see, once all the structure is put in, I don't really plan to add any more details because I don't think it necessarily needs it, and you're going to have a hard time even seeing it. But a lot of parts involved. Let me show you. Top part of the cage structure right here. Bottom part of the cage structure with the vertical members on it. But again, just like in assembling the cage structure for the engines, it was just a matter of having the parts available to do test fittings. I did make sure to at least put this assembly together before I started building up the cage to make sure everything would fit properly, and this base plate has to go on a certain way because you've got an alignment hole in the bottom. In the top there are 2 alignment holes which correspond to 2 alignment tabs on the top here. Each one of these vertical members is a separate piece. And the thing that's key when you're building this, there are 2 of them that have cutouts to fit where the carry-throughs for the landing pad boxes go. So just be careful not to swap those around. And it's very easy if one is not careful to reverse that base plate there and put it on backwards. So study your drawings very carefully when you're assembling this, and take your time because rushing is what leads to mistakes, and you want to make sure that everything is positioned right before you put glue to the part. One thing I noticed about the test shot is they did make, there was one little alignment pin, there were alignment pins missing on the bottom and the top that I had to correct. Originally, because I guess these sets of rods here and here were originally going to be designed to be one piece, but they decided to mold them separately, and they forgot to put alignment tabs for 2 sets of the rods in there, so I just went in there and put those in myself. The production kit, I understand they've already corrected that. There are a couple of things on the on the test shot that they have fixed. So it's going to be a better kit when it comes out. But I will say that the fit of this test shot is just incredible. They put a lot of effort into this, and most everything is fitting together without a problem. There's very few changes and updates that they're having to do to it. But cage structure right there. Let's talk a little about the passageway section itself. It's basically made up of 3 pieces. You've got the top, the roof of it, and then you've got the 2 sides. Very nicely designed. The floor, the only thing you got to worry about is there is a bit of a seam that goes down the central part of the floor. Because of the shape of the floor, I wanted to try to come up with something that was a flatter shape. So one of the things I experimented with was trying to cover up that seam. And the reason why I did that is because, let's put this together. The reason why I did that is the bottom seam here, you've got this piece of cage structure that passes right over it. This top one, you've got it nice and exposed, so I wanted to try to fill that without any problems. So what I ended up doing was trying to use a piece of very thin sheet styrene to cover it over and then sanding it flush. How well is it working? Well, maybe not as well as I would have hoped. If anything, I probably created a bit more work for myself. What I'm going to try on the second one, on the second module, is probably putting a little bit of a standoff under this carry-through structure to push the floor down, and then just basically filling the seam and sanding it. But even just filling the seam and sanding it would probably work fine. I just wanted to try to make sure that I had a nice flat floor to work with and not have something that's got an obvious curve there, but at the same time too, once the cage structure is put in over the top, it's probably going to disguise things just fine. So I just thought I would show this idea in case any of you wanted to try it, but in my opinion it's probably not really necessary anyway. There is a bit of a seam that runs down the back section here, and it's a good idea to address that simply because even though you've got part of the cage structure covering over the top of this front and back, you're still probably going to see a little bit of the seam top and bottom. So I just used gap filling CA glue to fill that, sanded it flush. There was a little bit of an opening down here, so it took a couple applications of CA glue to fill that little gap and then sand it at a 90-degree corner. The only other thing you got to worry about is when you're sanding, that you don't accidentally sand a curve into these areas right here. But even if that does happen, the cage structure usually does a very good job in disguising, so nobody's really able to see at the angles where there might be flaws, which is one of the nice appeals to the Eagle Transporter in the first place. So there you go. Pod section. After building one of these, the second one should take not quite as long. The reason why I'm going a little slower on that, I'm debating whether or not I want to add lights to the command module, and I'm thinking about putting my battery pack in the nose of the command module itself. But I know that what Jim Small did on his test shot was he actually took one of these sections, made this wall removable, and then he's got a battery pack and a power switch that goes right in and fits into the module, and then he's got the wire just running into the command module right there. It works for his uses. Don't know if I'm going to use that, but I'm kind of taking my time, and I want to evaluate when I get to the command module what my options are before I actually go and commit to that, commit to a specific method. But whatever I use to light the command module, it's going to be a relatively simple deal, just 1-2 LEDs at most and 2 batteries. And finally for tonight we get to the one of the major features of the Eagle, which is the spine. And I must say this is a very well designed piece of engineering. Multiple pieces. They did not mold this as one piece like they did on the 12-inch kit. So as a result, you can build it more accurately. But what you've essentially got are 1, 2, 3, 4 halves of the front and back side sections of the spine. This is a separate piece. This is a separate piece. These two are separate pieces, and they join up right in the center. Now, somebody on one of the forums that I go to, Britt Muller, I believe it was concerned about how the structure was molded and that it might not have enough structural rigidity the way everything is joined up at the center there. I can allay his fears and say that these are designed with a very deep slot tab mechanism, top and bottom. You've got two tabs that kind of go in about 4 millimeters into a set of slots in the corresponding part on either side. There's a total of 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, and they fit in really, really nice using plastic weld glue. It solidifies them nice, but the beauty of the structure is when all the cross members are in place, this becomes a very, very strong structure. Very resistant to twisting, very resistant to flexing, so I don't think there's going to be a problem with popping a glue seam, provided you use the proper glues. If you use the liquid weld glues and don't use CA for that assembly, you're doing fine. Now, assembling it, there is a bit of a seam that runs in 4 areas right in the center. So what I did was, I used combinations of files and sanding sticks to sand the seams really nice, and then once I got most of the seam knocked down, I went and used some thin CA glue just as a filler to fill the gaps, and then everything got polished off really nice, and can't even see a trace that there was a seam there. It all is nice and solid, and the glue is not cracking out of there at all. After you've assembled those pieces, then you've got the longer cross member frames on the bottom. I've only installed them in a couple of places, and then you've got the smaller ones on the top. And the way the kit is designed, they fit together really, really nice. Again, using liquid glue is a good idea, simply because you've got a lot of these pieces to worry about to align. I would say you can build this structure with a minimum of the 2 bottom pieces, these 2 longer ones, which I'll explain in a moment, and then maybe 4 of the top pieces, just putting them together to get the basic alignment of this cage structure into shape. And then, as you go along and add additional cross members, all you got to do is just flex the truss structure a little bit to just pop in the new pieces as you go along. Then brush a little of the liquid glue on either side just to make sure everything fits properly. Another thing that I did after I got it assembled, I noticed things were ever so slightly out of alignment. So one of the things I did was I made sure to put a nice big flat book over the top center of the structure when I allowed the glue to dry overnight, just to make sure that everything would be nice and square. Now, when you put a flat book on there, you want to make sure to do it on the bottom of the structure like this, not on the top. The reason being is you've got the alignment pegs 1, 2, 3 that align into the cage structure on the front and the back, and as a result you've got a gap there. So if you put a book or something heavy on the center part, you might run the risk of distorting the cage structure in the center. So if you just flip it over upside down and put your book there, then everything should square up nice. As to when to do this, once the basic assembly of the truss is done, you let it dry for maybe about an hour, then you can put the book on there and let it sit overnight, and the part will not pop out on you. It will not break apart or shatter depending on the glue that you use. It will just align everything right, but just make sure you don't put like a really heavy book on there. Just like a simple hardcover is all you need, or maybe a couple of thinner weight books. Now these two structures right here, and here, which have a couple of the cross members, and they got this piece right here. It's critical that these pieces go here in this position because these are used to help attach the passenger pod. These holes right here on the assembled model, you've got a screw that goes in each side, and the screw holes go into the passenger pod, and basically you put a screw in there and screw the passenger pod down. When you want to detach the passenger pod or add something else, then all you got to do is just loosen the screws and the passenger pod just comes out. So it's very critical that you put these in properly, because if these holes are aligned the other direction, they're just going to be sitting on top of the passageway sections and they're going to be totally useless, and then you're going to have to drill another hole in each of these to accommodate the screws. So very critical that you put those in the right segment and in the right orientation. The reason why I don't have the rest of the cross members installed yet is I'm just in the process of taking care of a whole bunch of the little ejector pin marks that run down the structure. What are ejector pin marks? Basically, they're little pins in the mold that are designed that when the pieces are shot and the plastic is cooling, these little pins come out and actually help demold the part. But usually they leave these little circles, indentations in various areas. Every kit's got them. Some kits are designed better for hiding those. The cage structure, given how long it is in certain assemblies, Round 2 had to design it a certain way, but they've done a pretty good job obscuring those areas. But I'm in the process of filling and sanding some of those little ejector pin marks just to disguise their appearance, mostly on the top part of the cage structure rather than on the bottom. The bottom ones are going to be obscured by the corridor sections front and back. In hindsight, probably would have been better to take care of those before I did the assembly, but I wanted to see just how visible they were before I actually started tackling and filing those. But I do admit I've made a little bit more work for myself, but just something I wanted to pass along. Overall, things are going quite well. Hopefully in about a week I'll have the second corridor section done. The engine section, with the exception of the bells, should be finished by then. The bells, I have started putting the first primer coat on. I just got to polish them down and fix some of the flaws that the primer revealed, and then I'll shoot them in gloss black and do the Alclad metallic process on them. But things are going rather well. I also hope to be starting work on the passenger pod very soon, and I'm going to build this particular model probably up as a rescue eagle with the red stripes. I want to give myself a nice little challenge and give my model a nice little bit of color. But overall, things are going quite well, and when this kit does finally hit, it's going to be well worth the money. I know it's a little expensive. Some people are grousing over that, but hey, they put a lot of thought into the design of this structure, and the fact that everything is fitting together as well as it is on the first generation test shot means that they did the right things in the design process. But not much longer of a wait. It is my hope that I might be able to get this done by November 17th. Why? Well, because there's a local model club meeting I want to go to, and it'd be really nice if I could have this model fully assembled by then. We'll see what happens. At the same time, too, I'm not going to rush it, and will we see this model by the end of November? I don't know for sure, but I still think I do think we will definitely see it before the end of 2015, and it's going to be a worthy seller. It's going to be a good seller for round 2. Of course, a lot of us are going to be building Star Wars models at the same time, but oh well. So, if you want a model on your Christmas list, tell your spouse, hey, pre-order a Eagle transporter kit from Round 2 MPC, the 22-inch kit, and you won't be disappointed. This is a beautiful model. We've waited about almost 40 years to see one, and I can tell you it's a beauty so far. And when I do my next update by next weekend, you'll see the progress I've made. In the meantime, thank you for watching.